Okay, let's unpack this. We've got some really incredible source material today. It's called The Engineered Leader, Environments of Performance. And honestly, it offers a perspective that, well, it really challenges how we usually think about getting things done, about high performance. Effective leadership.
It really does.
Forget the motivational posters for just a second. What if all that usual stuff about grit, sheer willpower, just trying harder? What if that's actually not the main thing?
Right.
What if peak performance, that clarity we're all chasing, the ability to really execute and lead? What if it isn't some innate talent you either have or you don't? What if it's actually a direct result of the environments you consciously create and inhabit?
That is precisely the core argument this material digs right into.
Yeah.
It shifts the entire conversation. It's not about, forcing motivation moment to moment. It's about architecture.
Architecture, I like that.
The source basically argues performance is engineered. It's built deliberately, brick by brick, system by system, you could say. It's a fascinating, almost counterintuitive way to look at what drives success.
Yeah.
Moving away from this internal psychological battle.
Yeah, the constant struggle.
Towards something more external, more structural.
Yeah.
A design challenge.
And I love that framing. It feels, I don't know, like a powerful shortcut maybe. Yeah. Instead of constantly fighting distraction inside your own head with just sheer mental force.
Right.
You focus on designing the space, the system, the structure around you that makes focus and high performance the natural, almost inevitable outcome.
Exactly. Yeah. It makes it the path of least resistance.
So our mission for this deep dive is pretty clear. We want to break down this really provocative concept from the source. We'll explore the different kinds of environments it talks about. And trust me, it goes way beyond just tidying up your desk.
Oh, much deeper.
We'll dig into why this engineering approach is presented as, frankly, more effective than just relying on willpower. And most importantly, we'll try to reveal the practical, sometimes kind of surprising ways you can actually apply this idea right now to your own work, your projects, maybe your team, and even just the way you think.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's jump into the first section then. This really lays the groundwork.
So the source kicks things off by talking about something it calls the return. Now, this isn't about coming back from a vacation, or a business trip.
Okay.
The material defines this as a specific moment, often quiet, maybe even invisible to others, when a leader, or really anyone aiming for high performance, consciously returns. Returns from what? From fragmentation, from drift, from distraction.
Right, those moments, I know them. Like early morning before the chaos starts.
Exactly. Or late at night when everything else has gone silent. Or maybe even just those few precious minutes you manage to grab between back-to-back meetings.
That little gap.
That threshold moment.
Yeah.
Right before you dive back into the really deep work or the strategic thinking that demands your full focus.
Okay, so it's that critical pause. The moment where you could just drift. You could check email, look at your phone, whatever the easy default thing is. The source is saying that moment is key.
That moment is absolutely pivotal.
And instead of just trying to pump yourself up or make a new resolution, the source says you need to build something right then and there.
Precisely. The source states that in that specific moment, just before you reintegrate, the fundamental action isn't about building a resolution or even just whipping up a quick to-do list.
Okay.
It's about building an environment. And this is where the source makes a really powerful claim. It says focus is not actually a choice you make with willpower in the heat of the battle. Productivity isn't just an intention you hold in your mind. Both of those things, focus and productivity, the source argues, are consequences. They are the direct result of the specific environment you consciously step back into during that moment of return. Willpower. It's just not the main sustainable driver here.
Wow. So if my desk is a total disaster zone, my notifications are constantly buzzing and I've got 20 browser tabs open. The environment I'm stepping into is basically causing the fragmentation, regardless of how much I want to focus.
That's exactly the idea. The source suggests that every environment carries a distinct kind of energy. Think about it. Walking into a quiet library feels completely different from walking into a loud, bustling cafe.
Right. Or a messy garage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This source applies that same concept to our work environments, our mental spaces. Some environments are just inherently designed, or maybe they just happen to be designed in a way that splinters the mind. They encourage fragmentation. Others are built deliberately to consolidate the mind, to really encourage that deep focus. Some spaces seem to provoke chaos and overstimulation, while others are meticulously orchestrated to create silence, clarity.
And the big difference then between someone who just gets kind of pushed around by these environmental energies and someone who consistently performs at a high level, according to the source, it's that the high performers don't just adapt or react.
No.
They engineer the energy they need. They do it by designing the environment they're going to return to.
Yes, exactly. The high-performing leaders described in this material, they don't just magically wake up feeling clear, focused, ready to go.
That's not automatic.
Not at all. They consciously, deliberately return to that state of clarity and focus. And the way they return isn't some mental trick. It's not a shot of caffeine or adrenaline. It's achieved through architecture, through design, through discipline applied to the environment itself. Every single moment of reintegration, whether it's after a long break or just switching between tasks, it requires a structure, an environment, one that's strong enough to resist entropy, that natural tendency for things to slide towards disorder and distraction.
So it's like building a really solid launching pad. It makes the takeoff almost effortless instead of just trying to jump really, really hard off of like swampy ground.
That's a great analogy.
And the source says this isn't just a metaphor, right? It actually talks about a literal room.
Absolutely. The source really emphasizes that this engineered environment can, and often should, start with a literal, physical, constructed space, the one the leader returns to. This is an abstract theory. It's concrete.
Okay.
The space itself is intentionally designed. It's meant to reflect and reinforce the leader's highest intentions, their priorities, right back at them.
So what does that physical space actually look like? According to the source, what are the key details?
Well, the source gives some pretty specific examples of what makes up this physical environment of return. The desk, for instance, is stripped down. It's clean, free of the clutter that just pulls your mind in 10 different directions at once.
Okay.
The screen shows only what is absolutely essential for the task at hand. You're deliberately minimizing all that visual noise. If there's music, it's chosen specifically to support focus, or maybe ambient noise is actively removed to create silence.
Interesting.
There's no background confusion, no visual or auditory chaos screaming for your attention. The space is filled with what the source calls contextual gravity, meaning everything in it serves a clear purpose directly related to the deep work or the strategic thinking you're about to do.
It's almost like the room itself becomes this silent, powerful message board, constantly reminding you, okay, this is what matters right now. This is why you're here.
Exactly that. The environment becomes a physical embodiment of your commitment to focus. And then within that literal room, what really gives it power are what the source calls Saturn's tools.
Saturn's tools. Okay, intriguing.
Cadence, calibration, and structure. The argument here is that you don't just greet the day or a really tough task with raw energy or some vague intention.
Right.
You approach it with rhythm, with a predictable cadence. Why? Because rhythm builds momentum. And momentum, the source strongly asserts, is the real engine of sustained performance, not fleeting inspiration, not bursts of adrenaline.
Momentum.
Okay, cadence, structure. This sounds like it leads into that tension the source describes.
Right.
It uses these mythological references, right? Mars versus Saturn.
Yes, exactly. Mars, the god of war, represents that urgent, that powerful, almost seductive hunger to just act, to move, to build, to fight, to launch something.
Yeah, that energy that whispers, don't worry about the plan, skip the prep, forget the ritual, just go. Act now.
That's Mars.
Yeah.
And that Mars energy is absolutely vital, right? You need that drive, that ambition. But the critical point the source makes over and over is that Mars without Saturn, well, it just burns out. It collapses into chaos or it crashes spectacularly.
So Saturn is the counterpoint. Saturn, the god of structure, time, limits, discipline. Saturn provides the necessary container, the framework. Leaders, the effective ones described here, they don't just wildly leap into action fueled only by Mars.
No.
No, they land. They re-enter their work inside a system, a Saturn-like structure that holds, channels, and directs that powerful Mars energy effectively and sustainably.
Okay, so Saturn is the container, the framework, the discipline. It gives the Mars energy direction, makes it last. And this isn't just some external process chart, right? The source calls it engineered presence.
Yes, it's about creating a structured internal state, but one that's actively supported and reinforced by the external environment. Engineered presence is that daily space you consciously return to. It's the daily tone you intentionally set for yourself and your work. It's the daily order you impose. And this engineered presence sends a really powerful subconscious message. You are home now. You are back. Your focus belongs here. Now build. It's almost like a ritual, a deliberately constructed state you step into.
Which leads us to what feels like a really strong, maybe even controversial claim from the source in this section. Your most powerful strategy isn't necessarily your brilliant business idea, or your ambitious 5-year vision, or even your amazing network.
What is it then?
Your greatest strategy, according to the source, is the room you walk into, the environment you return to, whether it's when your feet hit the floor in the morning or when you sit down at your desk to tackle the hard stuff. It's that internal and external climate that you have painstakingly prepared in advance, ready to receive your highest energy and your most focused attention.
Because, as the source states pretty bluntly, if that environment is one of chaos, noise, constant interruption, easy distraction, trying to execute at your potential in that space is like trying to sprint through deep mud.
Doesn't matter how strong you are.
Exactly. Doesn't matter how strong your willpower is in that moment. The environment itself must be capable of holding your mind steady. The source is quite direct here. It says, no one executes at their potential without an environment that holds their mind. Not even you. It completely flips the question. It's not, how will I push myself harder today?
Yeah.
It becomes, how will I engineer my return with more precision, more clarity, more gravity?
Wow. And when you master that return, stepping back into that structured, prepared environment, you stop losing the thread. You stop losing the signal of what's actually important amidst all the noise.
Precisely. It becomes less about constantly fighting off distractions and more about making deep focus the path of least resistance. You effectively start to embody the structure yourself, and the external chaos just has less power to pull you off course.
So for you, the listener, the really key takeaway from this first section is this fundamental shift in perspective. Performance isn't mainly this endless internal battle against distraction and apathy that you have to win with sheer willpower every single day.
No, that sounds exhausting.
It is. Instead, the source argues, performance is the direct, predictable result of designing an environment, maybe starting with your physical space, and those rituals of return that is built specifically to support focus, clarity, and momentum. It's about building a robust system anchored by those Saturn tools of cadence and structure that you can consistently step back into and rely upon.
That's a really powerful reframing. But then the source takes this idea and expands it quite significantly, right? It moves beyond just the physical space.
Exactly. Section 2 takes this foundational concept and really broadens the scope. It dives into what it calls the architecture of invisible environments.
Invisible environments.
The source pushes us to look, beneath the surface of our daily routines. We hear that phrase all the time, your environment shapes your outcomes. But what if the most influential environments aren't the ones we can actually see?
This is where it gets really insightful, I think. The source poses the question. What if the environment isn't just your physical location? What if it includes the systems you build, your routines, the conceptual frameworks you use to think, your digital architecture?
So not just tools or habits.
Exactly. What if these aren't merely tools or habits, but are in fact powerful environments in disguise?
Okay, how does the source define that?
It provides a very clear and pretty expansive definition. Anything you create and then inhabit becomes an environment. This could be a really meticulously designed workflow for how you handle incoming emails or requests. It could be a specific written framework you always use for evaluating new project ideas, or maybe a rigorously documented standard for how your team communicates updates.
Right.
The moment you start to live inside that construct, the moment you operate within its inherent logic and you find yourself being shaped by its structure, it stops being just a system or a tool. It becomes effectively a world that you inhabit and that profoundly defines your actions within it.
So if I have a totally chaotic, completely ad hoc system for managing my tasks, where I'm just constantly reacting to the latest notification, that is an environment I'm living in, and it's shaping my performance just as much as a messy office would.
Precisely. That chaos is your environment. And the source argues that truly effective leaders have to recognize this. They have to become intentional architects of these invisible worlds.
Which is different from what most people do.
Well, the source suggests most people believe they're just moving through life, making conscious choices moment by moment. But actually, they're often navigating these complex environments, systems, routines, ingrained ways of thinking that they either constructed unconsciously without realizing their shaping power, or maybe worse, they simply inherited them. From previous jobs, from default cultural norms, from just the way things have always been done.
And the consequences of just inheriting or unconsciously creating these environments of chaos, or maybe emotional volatility, or that constant sense of frantic overreaction that often gets mislabeled as urgency, those consequences are significant.
According to the source, absolutely yes. Without deliberately recognizing and then actively re-engineering that internal structure, that invisible environment governing how you process information, how you make decisions, how you manage your energy, any external change you try to implement.
Like a new strategy.
Yeah, a new strategy, a new initiative, whatever it is. It's essentially being built on a foundation of sand. It will eventually collapse back into that default chaos because you're bringing your old, chaotic internal environment with you into the new situation.
This feels like the really key distinction the source makes between reactive leadership, which is just trying to adapt to whatever fire pops up next, and truly transformational leadership.
How so?
Well, transformational leaders aren't just better adapters. They actively build the environments that then do the shaping of behavior and outcomes for them and their teams.
Exactly. They understand that relying solely on individual willpower or constantly trying to push people with adrenaline and urgency just isn't sustainable. It burns people out.
Right.
By building robust, often invisible environments, clear systems, defined structures, predictable processes, the environment itself becomes this powerful container. It disciplines behavior naturally, it directs energy effectively, and it conditions both the leader and their team towards consistent, predictable momentum. It removes so much of that moment-to-moment negotiation with distraction or disorder.
And this isn't just for big company-wide organizational structures, is it? The source points out this engineering happens at a really micro level too.
Absolutely. It manifests in our microroutines. The specific way you choose to start your workday, how you process your email inbox, the exact steps you follow to end a meeting effectively. It's in your mental checklists, the questions you always ask yourself before making a key decision, the specific criteria you apply, the structure you use to process critical feedback. When you define expectations clearly using structured tools, when you clarify who's responsible for what using a predefined process, or when you build a mandatory reflection step into every project phase that's not just, support.
Well, that's it then.
The source calls that infrastructure. Deliberate, performance-enhancing infrastructure.
So that's Saturn's influence again, providing that necessary gravity, that structure, to hold the potentially chaotic Mars energy in a productive orbit.
Yes. And the source warns pretty clearly that without this infrastructure, without this invisible environment of deliberate structure, even the most brilliant individuals or the most talented teams will inevitably struggle. Their energy, however high it might be, will be undirected. It'll lead to wasted effort, frustration, chaos. They'll just spin out.
It sounds like many leaders, according to the source, try to scale their impact by simply adding more adrenaline, more urgency. That's Mars without Saturn again, isn't it? And the source says that's basically doomed to fail.
The source is quite blunt about this, yeah.
Yeah.
They launch ambitious campaigns without first designing the structured container needed to actually manage them effectively. They recruit incredibly talented people and then just place them into these undefined spaces, maybe calling it empowerment or freedom.
Oh, really?
But really, the source argues, it's just an environment of entropy, of disorder. And the source states unequivocally, entropy does not build legacies. Meaningful, lasting impact requires deliberate structure.
Okay. So the profound challenge from this section for you, the listener, is really to become conscious of the invisible worlds you currently inhabit. What environments are you living inside right now, shaping your behavior, shaping your outcomes that aren't physical?
That's the core question.
What about your cognitive environment? The mental models, the frameworks you use, or maybe the ones you lack. Your emotional environment, those default ways you react to stress or setbacks. And critically, your structural environments, the often invisible logic governing how you organize your tasks, your communication habits, your decision-making processes.
What rhythms have you maybe unconsciously laid down in your day or your week? What unspoken logic is silently dictating how quickly you move from having an idea to actually taking action on it? Or how your energy flows through the day when you allow it to rise, when it typically falls, when you demand it refocus. The crucial, maybe even uncomfortable insight here from the source is that until you can actually name those environments, especially the invisible ones you've either inherited or maybe built without conscious intent, you cannot possibly begin to redesign them to serve you better.
And this leads directly into the source's definition of a true high performer. It's not just someone with great ideas or, relentless drive.
What is it then?
It's someone who designs the right environments, both the physical ones and these crucial invisible ones, and then submits to them. Now, that word submits might sound restrictive, almost negative.
It can, yeah.
But the source presents it not as a burden at all. It presents it as a profound form of freedom.
That's the paradox the source really highlights. The more refined, the more deliberate, the more robust the environment you build, the clearer the structure, the more defined the process, the more disciplined the space, the less willpower you actually need to expend day to day to maintain high performance. Because the environment itself starts doing the heavy lifting. It keeps you on track, it directs your energy appropriately, and that, the source argues, is when true velocity sustained, powerful progress becomes possible.
Okay.
This is what it calls environment mastery. It's not just managing your time or your tasks on a surface level. It's engineering the very systems and spaces you operate within. Systems that actively teach you, that appropriately restrain you when necessary, that elevate your focus and hold you steady when you're faced with complexity or big challenges.
So every project management system you use, every morning routine you cultivate, every digital tool or conceptual framework you adopt, if you truly live inside it and it shapes how you operate day to day, it's more than just a project or a tool.
It's an environment.
It's an environment.
Okay.
And the quality of those invisible environments, the source concludes, will ultimately determine the altitude of your leadership and the consistency of your performance.
So the key takeaway from this section for you, the listener, is incredibly powerful. Your performance isn't just tied to your physical office or your nice desk setup. It is fundamentally shaped by the invisible systems you build and operate within every single day.
Right.
By becoming conscious of these systems, your routines, your workflows, your mental frameworks, and then consciously choosing to redesign them, you gain an immense lever for improving your effectiveness and building lasting resilience.
Okay, building on this idea of environments as these active shapers of behavior and capability, the source provides a really concrete, compelling example of how this works in practice. It talks about something called the project incubator.
Yeah, Section 3 focuses specifically on this incubator concept as an example of a meticulously engineered environment. It's designed for what the source calls discipline by design.
Discipline by design. I like that.
The foundational premise, again, is that every single environment is a teacher. Some environments, maybe by their chaotic design or just lack of any design, they teach drift, procrastination, confusion.
We've all been in those.
Right. The project incubator, according to the source, is specifically engineered to teach the opposite, to teach discipline, accountability, and high-impact execution.
And the source makes it really clear, this is not some passive classroom setting, right? It's not a theoretical exercise.
And not at all. It describes it as a live fire zone for future executives and operators. It's a controlled environment, yes, but it's one where pressure isn't just some potential side effect you try to manage.
It's part of the design.
It's applied deliberately, strategically, because the source believes that structure becomes the fertile soil of real growth precisely when it's under pressure.
Yep.
Inside this incubator environment, the focus is on deep immersion. Participants don't just, attend workshops about managing projects. They are dropped directly inside live projects. Deadlines are real, and they are unyielding. Deliverables are specific, they're tangible, and there are consequences if they're missed or subpar. Roles are clearly defined with non-negotiable responsibilities. This whole environment is designed to simulate the intense, real-world conditions of leadership and execution.
But with structure.
But within a structured container that deliberately removes the ultimate safety net of inaction or ambiguity. You can't just drift.
This sounds like where that tension between Mars, the drive, the ambition, and Saturn, the constraints, the structure that we talked about earlier, it isn't just a concept anymore. It becomes the actual engine driving development within the individual.
Absolutely. Mars provides the raw energy, that hunger to build something, to achieve the goal. Saturn provides the constraints, the tight timelines, the specific deliverables, the defined scope that can't just endlessly expand. The source argues that the tension created by forcing that powerful Mars energy to operate within Saturn's strict structure. That's not a problem to be avoided. That tension is the very force that pushes individuals to internalize the cadence of real responsibility and discipline. They learn, through struggle, how to move their vision, their ambition, from the abstract realm of just ideas
into reality,
into the high-friction reality of actually executing within defined boundaries and under pressure.
And that friction, that inevitable struggle and discomfort that happens inside this well-formed, structured environment, that's exactly where the source says the future operator is truly forged. Execution itself becomes the curriculum.
Yes. Participants aren't being lectured on theories of project management from a safe distance. They are dropped right into live project life cycles. They have clear scope, real stakes, and a timeline that is constantly, relentlessly ticking down.
No escape.
There's no pause button on the pressure or the deadlines. They learn by doing, often under duress, but always within the defined system.
And the tools they're given, they aren't just academic concepts from a textbook, are they? The source calls things like project charters, status updates, stakeholder maps. It calls them instruments of movement.
Instruments of movement. I love that phrasing. They are tools that demand active engagement. You have to wield them effectively to make progress, to coordinate the effort properly, to communicate with clarity, especially under pressure.
And if you don't,
If you fail to use these instruments correctly, if you stall, if you try to avoid them, the environment itself, by design, tightens deliberately around you. The pressure actually increases.
and the source says this isn't arbitrary punishment, it's purposeful.
It's purposeful. It's because real fundamental growth, the kind that sticks, comes from impact under fire. You don't just learn how to perform a task in isolation. You learn how to deliver tangible results when the stakes are high and the clock is ticking.
The skills developed in this kind of deliberately engineered high-pressure environment, they're presented as being really sharp, repeatable, hard-earned capabilities.
Yes, the source lists specific examples. Things like communicating effectively under pressure, the ability to break down complex, messy tasks with brutal clarity, precision in coordinating workflows across different people or teams, clean and accurate milestone tracking so everyone knows exactly where things stand, and the capacity for making sound, strategic risk calls based on the available data, all within the given constraints.
This sounds like it goes way beyond just basic project literacy. The source calls it operator training.
Exactly. Operator training. It's training individuals not just to understand projects, but to take a high-level vision, frame it properly within the constraints of reality, break it down into executable steps, build it piece by piece, coordinate the moving parts, and reliably ship it on time, on spec.
And this whole process is powered by that dual rhythm we keep coming back to. Mars fueling the ambitious push forward, but Saturn ensuring that drive stays structured, preventing chaos and wasted effort.
It's drive without the chaos, structure without the inertia. Both are essential.
What emerges from an environment like this? It isn't just a completed project or a participant who learned some new skills. The source argues that it actually molds a new environment for entrepreneurial rigor within the individuals themselves.
How so?
The incubator acts as both a mold shaping behavior and a prototype, demonstrating what high performance looks like. It clearly shows and demands what's required: robust systems, predictable cadences, rigorous reviews, relentless and actionable feedback loops.
Okay.
It's presented almost like the essential scaffolding, the first serious rehearsal for leading something real later on, like living inside the early anatomy of a future company or a major initiative.
Because at the end of the day, you aren't training founders or future leaders just to have big dreams or inspiring visions, are you?
No, the goal is training them to move, to execute consistently, effectively, within defined parameters, and especially under pressure. The source says the cockpit is live from day one. Feedback is in gentle coaching. It's hard-coded into the system. Missteps don't just result in a bad grade.
They have real consequences.
They result in immediate, tangible consequences within the simulated reality of the project, which provides incredibly powerful, instant learning. You don't make that mistake twice.
And crucially, within that intense pressure, participants begin to build that essential instinct, not just to act decisively themselves, but to actively design environments around themselves and others. Environments that inherently demand action, clarity, and accountability from everyone involved. They learn to become architects of performance, not just participants hoping things go well.
This is how execution, that raw ability to consistently deliver results under pressure, becomes fundamentally intertwined with identity. It's not just something you do, it's part of who you are. This is how leaders are forged, how that raw Mars energy meets and is disciplined by Saturn's structure, and how both are shaped together into something resilient and effective, like steel being forged in a furnace.
So the vital takeaway from this section, for you, the listener, is that the principles embodied in this project incubator idea, the deliberate use of structure, constraint, and pressure to forge real capability. They apply far beyond just startup accelerators or specific training programs.
Right, it's broader than that.
These principles are relevant to any significant project, goal, or personal development effort you undertake. It's about intentionally building a miniature environment around your objective, whether that's writing a book, launching a new product feature, getting fit, or implementing a new process at work. An environment that is specifically designed not for comfort,
Actually, not for comfort.
but designed to demand disciplined execution from you and to actively mold you into a more capable operator, someone who is ready to handle complexity, ambiguity, and pressure effectively.
That's a powerful concept. The source then takes this idea of environmental shaping to what might be the most critical domain of all, our internal world, our mental capacity to actually handle the demands of high performance as leadership without cracking.
Yes, Section 4 is titled Strategic Immersion, Preparing the Mind to Hold Pressure. And it starts by emphasizing a really crucial prerequisite for any kind of significant scale or growth. You need capacity.
Capacity, not just bandwidth.
And not just bandwidth, which is maybe the ability to handle many things at once on the surface. This is about deep capacity, the kind of mental and emotional resilience that doesn't crack, doesn't collapse when the stakes get really high and the pressure truly mounts.
Okay. And this capacity, the source argues, isn't something you're just born with. It's built. How?
It's built through structured immersion. Now, this isn't about passively absorbing information like sitting through another lecture or reading another book. No. It's about deliberately flooding the individual system, their cognitive landscape, their emotional landscape with calculated tension and complexity. The purpose isn't simply to overwhelm them, though it might feel like it sometimes. The purpose is to teach the mind how to breathe effectively, how to function optimally inside that pressure. This process, the source explains, builds genuine adaptation, not just temporary motivation. Motivation might get you started, but adaptation is what allows you to sustain high performance when conditions are difficult, uncertain, or constantly changing. Structured immersion conditions the mind to operate effectively, not just when things are easy and predictable.
But specifically when they're hard.
Exactly. When they are hard, uncertain, and demanding, that's when you need it most.
And this feels like another area where Saturn's influence, structure, discipline, constraint is really dominant, shaping that internal landscape through specific tools. The source mentions things like rigorous frameworks, comprehensive glossaries, layered reflection prompts, structured templates.
Yes, and these tools aren't presented as just administrative aids, ways to organize your external work more neatly. According to the source, they are meticulously designed to shape the thinker themselves.
How do they do that?
Well, think about it. Frameworks provide essential structure to analyze complex problems systematically, preventing scattered thinking. Glossaries ensure precision and clarity in language and thought, cutting through ambiguity. Layered prompts force deeper levels of reflection and analysis than you might undertake spontaneously. Templates enforce discipline, ensuring critical steps aren't skipped under pressure. They literally become the internal architecture for clear, structured thinking.
Okay, that makes sense. But Mars is still present in this internal environment too, right? It's not all just cold structure.
Absolutely. Mars shows up in the internal fight required to stay engaged with these demanding tools.
The effort.
The effort to push through cognitive fatigue when you just want to stop, to resist the urge to skim the complex reading or skip the hard reflection question, to keep running the complex reflection prompts even when you're tired, to really scan the strategic maps provided by the frameworks looking for insights, to simply show up and do the hard mental work day after day, even when it's difficult and uncomfortable.
That internal battle.
The source actually describes this as the war between system and spirit. The system, Saturn's tools, provides the demanding structure, and the spirit, Mars drive, provides the energy needed to fight and engage within that structure.
And when that internal system, the Saturn-like architecture of frameworks and prompts, aligns with the spirit's drive, with Mars, that's when real change happens.
That's when behavior and capability truly lock in, according to the source. At this point, you're not merely learning new information or acquiring new skills on the surface. You are actively reprogramming your fundamental cognitive and behavioral responses to complexity and pressure. It goes deeper.
And this immersive environment, it deliberately removes the easy ways out, the escape hatches.
Yes, the source is very specific about this. It emphasizes avoiding passive learning opportunities. No just sitting back and listening. No simple multiple-choice quizzes that test recall rather than application. No possibility of just coasting through the material without deep, active engagement.
Why is that so important?
Because the tools themselves are designed to demand friction. They are built to relentlessly interrupt your default settings, our natural tendency towards superficial engagement or avoiding the really hard thinking.
So each module you have to complete, every field you must fill out in a template, every challenging reflection prompt you're forced to answer, These act as deliberate checkpoints.
Exactly. They are checkpoints. You have to actively pass through them with deep engagement and clear intention. If you try to bypass them, if your own internal avoidance kicks in, you effectively get bounced back. You can't proceed without doing the required cognitive work. The system forces the engagement.
The deeper, more profound purpose of all this structured immersion, according to the source, it sounds like it's actually trying to, repace your nervous system?
That's the language it uses, yes. To literally repace your nervous system. It's training your mind and body to hold more complexity without feeling constantly overwhelmed, to see the broader strategic picture even while you're focused on executing the details, to act cleaner, more decisively, under pressure, and fundamentally, to lead longer and more effectively without collapsing under the cognitive or emotional load that comes with high-stakes roles.
Because the ultimate goal isn't just to fill your head with more knowledge or to train you to perform well only when everything is calm and predictable.
No, that's table stakes.
Right. It's to train you to think clearly, strategically, and effectively when the house is on fire. When crisis hits, when information is incomplete, when the stakes are highest, when everyone else is panicking. That is the core capacity this kind of structured, demanding immersion aims to build.
It's not primarily about teaching you more facts or theories. It's about installing an architecture into your mind, a set of structured ways of thinking and processing information that effectively thinks with you when you need it most.
An internal operating system.
Exactly. This internal architecture, forged through the consistent, demanding use of frameworks and structured reflection, it automatically helps hold your cadence. It corrects your natural drift towards chaos or superficiality. It disciplines your scope, keeping you focused on what's truly essential.
And the source makes a really compelling argument here, that if this internal system, this cognitive architecture, is built correctly through rigorous immersion, you don't just outgrow it as you become more experienced or face bigger challenges.
No,
you grow within it. You become exponentially more capable because you're utilizing its inherent structure and leveraging its discipline against ever larger problems.
That's interesting.
The layers of structured reflection, the strategic maps provided by the frameworks, the mental protocols for making decisions under uncertainty, they become like deeply etched neural tracks in your brain. So when the next crisis inevitably arrives, you don't have to scramble trying to figure out what to do or how to think from scratch.
You default to the structure.
Yeah. You simply return to these established, reliable internal tracks. You return to a state of clarity and structured processing because the architecture is already installed and ready to run.
That's the fundamental difference this kind of training aims for, isn't it? It results in ingrained posture and preparation, real capability, not just accumulated knowledge and information that might completely scatter under real pressure.
Exactly. And the source concludes this section with a really powerful statement. Leadership isn't solely about having all the right answers or some kind of innate charisma. It's about being the system, being the person with a robust internal architecture that holds the room steady and thinks clearly when everything else around you is breaking down or dissolving into chaos.
Wow. So for you, the listener, the crucial takeaway from this section is that building the mental resilience and the strategic clarity required for high performance and leadership under pressure. It's not a passive process. It doesn't rely on hope or chance or just waiting to get more experience.
Nope.
According to this source, you actively design and build this capacity by engineering how you think, using frameworks, using structured reflection, using deliberate mental constraints as environmental controls. This fundamentally reprograms your default cognitive and emotional responses. It makes you dramatically more capable when you're facing complexity, uncertainty, or crisis.
And all these powerful ideas, from the physical space to the invisible systems to the cognitive architecture, they all seem to converge in the final section of the source material, which it refers to quite dramatically as the crucible.
Yes. Section 5, titled Immersive Structured Learning Environments Where Transformation Breathes. This section really hammers home that non-negotiable premise. There's simply no such thing as passive, comfortable growth that leads to significant, lasting transformation.
It doesn't happen easily.
No. To truly become something greater, stronger, more capable than you are right now, the source argues you must voluntarily step into an environment that actively demands that transformation from you, through deliberate challenge, structure, and pressure.
It's not just another online course you click through or a series of lectures you half listen to. The source uses these really powerful, evocative metaphors.
Yeah.
It's a furnace. It's a crucible.
Right.
A properly designed, structured environment in this context doesn't merely add to your existing knowledge base. It fundamentally reconfigures you. And for anyone aspiring to high-stakes leadership or operating consistently at peak levels, this kind of deep reconfiguration is presented as absolutely non-negotiable. You can't just add new skills like apps on top of old, maybe chaotic underlying operating systems.
Yeah.
You don't just need more information, another book, or another motivational speaker telling you can do it. The source argues you need a system, an environment, one that forces a rearrangement of your fundamental rhythms, that ruthlessly confronts your blind spots, the things you don't see about yourself, and that actively builds your stamina under sustained, realistic pressure.
This is what these immersive, structured learning environments are designed to do. You don't just browse your way towards transformation at your own pace. You have to live in it, letting the demanding environment work on you, shape you.
In a true system, in this specific context, it doesn't teach through gentle lessons or easy answers or lots of applause for effort, does it?
No. According to the source, it teaches primarily through consequences and rhythms.
Consequences and rhythms. Explain that.
The rhythm of the process itself, the demanding deadlines, the structured interactions, the mandatory feedback loops, that rhythm trains the leader's internal ear. It helps them develop an instinct for recognizing the right pace needed for a situation, the necessary level of rigor, the appropriate response required by reality, not just by their own preference or comfort zone.
And the consequences.
The consequences, both positive for meeting the standard and negative for falling short within the system, provide immediate, undeniable feedback. The goal isn't just acquiring surface knowledge that might be forgotten next week. The goal is deep repatterning of behavior and thought patterns.
These environments are explicitly engineered to fight drift, that pervasive human tendency to lose focus, lose momentum, default to easier tasks, let things slide.
Yes, they're designed specifically to collapse the gap between simply intending to take action and actually consistently executing. And crucially, they forge muscle memory not only in performing specific tasks, but in how you think, how you frame challenging situations, and how you respond when you are under intense real-world pressure.
The scaffolding for these environments might be digital, built with software, templates, online platforms, but the source claims the resulting changes are much deeper, almost cellular.
How does it make that claim?
It argues that every specific tool within the environment acts as a form of discipline, an environmental control. A template isn't just a suggested format. It imposes structural discipline on your thinking and your work output. A timeline isn't just a schedule. It's a constant test of your precision and your ability to deliver on commitments. A required decision log isn't just documentation. It's an invitation, almost a demand, to develop a clear, accountable executive reflex in your thinking process. You have to justify your choices.
And the energy driving all this, it isn't just one-dimensional push, is it? This system seems to encode both Mars, that drive, and Saturn, the structure, directly into the learning environment itself, ensuring they're aligned.
Exactly. It's demanding, yes, but the source adds another interesting layer here.
Empathy.
Empathy. That sounds softer than the rest.
It does, but the source defines this empathy in a specific way. It's not softness. It's the architecture itself, recognizing the intense pressure, anticipating where participants are likely to feel burnout or want to quit, but still refusing to lower the standard or remove the necessary pressure.
Okay. So it's tough love baked into the system.
Precisely. It's a form of conditioning, the source argues, more akin to training a world-class athlete for peak performance under extreme stress than providing gentle, supportive coaching. It builds resilience by maintaining those high demanding standards, but within a structure that supports the effort without ever compromising on the absolute requirement for rigor and results.
In a well-built, immersive environment like this, the source suggests something really profound. The system itself effectively becomes the mentor.
The system is the mentor.
Yeah. It teaches you not through lectures or charismatic personalities, but through its very design. Through the calculated nudges embedded in the workflow. Through the engineered pauses that force reflection at critical moments. Through the deliberate, structured process, it compels you to navigate day after day. You aren't passively consuming material. You are being actively processed by it, shaped by it. And as you are processed by this demanding environment, by its requirements, something internal starts to harden, to sharpen.
That's the idea. The friction of wrestling with those complex reflection prompts, the constant repetition of using real-world tools and frameworks under pressure, the unwavering structure that simply doesn't allow you to drift or quit easily. All of this leaves a deep, lasting imprint on your core capability.
You start to move differently through your work.
Yes, You begin to move through your work with a new internal structure, an ingrained discipline that wasn't there before. You start to speak about challenges and opportunities using strategic language naturally. You organize your time and resources, not just efficiently, but like a tactician, planning a campaign. You spot potential risks almost instinctively because the environment has trained these capabilities directly into your operating system.
This leads to what the source presents as a kind of secret weapon that many conventional approaches to development miss entirely. Fundamental transformation, the kind that really sticks, doesn't primarily start with innate talent or raw intelligence or potential.
Where does it start?
It starts with the terrain, the environment you deliberately choose to place yourself in.
The terrain.
And the power of the right environment, the right terrain, isn't just that it teaches you to perform at a high level yourself. Crucially, the source argues, it teaches you how to build environments that perform and that train others to perform effectively, even without your constant direct supervision.
So it replicates itself.
Exactly. This, the source suggests, is the definition of legacy-level training, building systems that build people.
Because when the environment itself becomes the teacher, its lessons get embedded not just in your conscious memory, but deep in your operational DNA. And that teaching never really stops, does it? Even after you leave the initial training environment, even as you grow into bigger roles or start building your own teams and companies, the principles, the internal structure, the discipline it instilled, they remain with you.
Absolutely. These aren't presented as casual workshops for hobbyists who are just dabbling in self-improvement. The source consistently describes these environments as arenas. Arenas for operators, individuals who are being forged, rigorously tested, and prepared for real-world, high-stakes performance.
And the operator who emerges from such a system.
They aren't soft. They don't require constant hand-holding or supervision. They carry their own internal rhythm, their own discipline, because the system didn't just train them on the surface, it fundamentally changed them from within.
They don't need to look outside themselves constantly for external motivation or direction.
Exactly, because the environment and its embedded principles did their job effectively. They didn't just hold the person accountable in the moment, they rewired their internal operating system to be accountable and effective automatically as a default state.
Wow. The major takeaway from this final section for you, the listener, feels pretty profound. True, deep, and lasting growth, the kind that builds real capacity for high performance under pressure, is rarely comfortable.
Almost never.
It happens in environments that are specifically designed to challenge you, to confront your weaknesses, and to reshape your default ways of thinking and acting. By understanding how these structured, immersive learning environments function using deliberate pressure, constraint, and systemic teaching, you can consciously seek them out in your own development journey. Or, perhaps even more powerfully, you can start to incorporate their principles of demanding structured practice into your own self-development efforts.
It's about actively forging that internal operator self. The one who is instinctively ready, structurally prepared for whatever complexity or crisis comes next.
Okay, bringing all of these threads together now, the conclusion presented in the source material feels like it's describing a fundamental threshold, a line that serious builders and truly effective leaders must cross.
And it's not a threshold marked by external applause or getting a promotion.
No, it's marked by an internal shift. A deep commitment to architecting environments, both the internal ones in your mind and the external ones you operate within, that don't just encourage performance, but actively compel it.
Performance with teeth.
Performance with teeth, exactly, with stamina. Built on the kind of structured repetition and rigorous discipline that actually refines identity itself. It's presented as a conscious move away from just hoping for comfort or vague alignment.
Towards designing for tangible, consistent results, driven by unwavering structure.
What we've explored across these 5 sections, the source suggests, isn't just a collection of interesting insights or handy techniques. It's presented as something more like a unified theory of transformation and high performance.
A unified theory. And the absolute core of that theory
is this. Nothing truly meaningful, nothing consistently high-performing, nothing that genuinely lasts is sustained purely by willpower or bursts of motivation or even raw talent alone. Greatness, resilience, lasting impact. They are always fundamentally engineered.
Engineered, not just wished for.
And the primary thing you are engineering isn't your mood on a given day or your level of motivation. It is the environment itself. It's the space you inhabit, the rhythm you impose, the mental terrain you cultivate, the operational layer you build around your ambition. This environment then acts as this powerful, persistent force, holding that ambition accountable, structuring its energy and constantly silently saying, okay, now deliver.
We've traced that progression laid out so clearly by the source, haven't we? Starting with the surprising power of the physical room, meticulously designed to reduce drift and signal focus.
Right.
Then moving to those invisible systems we all inhabit, workflows, frameworks, routines, which, when we consciously engineer them, replace chaos with predictable cadence and clarity.
Then we saw how that becomes tangible in environments like the Project Incubator, where that productive conflict between Mars's drive and Saturn's structure actively shapes behavior and forges genuinely capable operators.
And finally, culminating in those deeply immersive architectures. The ones designed not just to educate you on the surface, but to fundamentally reforge the leader's mental capacity and resilience right down to the core, especially under pressure.
This whole approach is presented as the core discipline of what the source calls empire builders. Now, that's not necessarily about building literal empires.
No, it's more metaphorical.
It's about people who aren't just chasing random bursts of momentum, hoping something sticks. It's about those who become the very gravitational core that generates, directs, and sustains momentum, precisely because they consciously design the energy flow and build the environments that embody and perpetuate that flow over the long term.
The source lays out some pretty stark, almost demanding requirements for building anything of lasting significance, doesn't it? For creating a legacy that actually extends beyond your direct presence?
It does. It says you cannot sustainably scale something if you haven't first rigorously structured it.
Makes sense.
You cannot effectively lead something, whether it's a project, a team, or a whole company, if you haven't first submitted yourself to the discipline of its design and its execution within a structured environment. You have to live it.
Right. You can't just dictate it from outside.
And, maybe most profoundly, you cannot truly pass on deep knowledge, real capability, or a unique operating philosophy to others if you haven't personally suffered through the challenging high-friction process of building it, refining it, and living it within a demanding environment yourself. You have to earn it.
But when an environment is forged correctly, when it truly embodies these principles of deliberate structure, demanding discipline, strategic challenge, the source says something remarkable happens. It begins to teach others simply by its existence. It starts to multiply its impact far beyond the initial participants or the founder. It becomes the very soil, the bedrock of a culture, a philosophy, or a company that doesn't just rely on hoping people will perform well.
It builds performance into them.
It actively disciplines, shapes, and conditions high performance into everyone who enters it. The environment does the teaching.
That, the source concludes, is the true, often unseen work of the engineered leader. And the individuals who really commit to this path, they aren't just learning about business strategy or their specific technical field. They are learning something deeper. They are learning to become the system themselves. The human architecture that enables everything else around them to function effectively, to scale sustainably, and to thrive consistently under almost any conditions.
Because in the end, your legacy, it won't be measured solely by the number of projects you completed, or the titles you held, or the external successes you achieved, as significant as those might be.
What defines it then, according to this view?
The source posits that real, lasting legacy is ultimately defined by the environments you built. The physical spaces, the invisible systems, the cognitive architectures, and most importantly, by how many people became fundamentally more capable, more resilient, maybe even, as the source puts it, indestructible in their operational effectiveness, simply because they passed through those environments that you took the time and effort to engineer.
That's a truly powerful reframe of what impact really means.
It really is. It takes leadership, it takes personal performance from something that often feels so nebulous, so dependent on maybe innate qualities or luck. And it reframes it as something fundamentally architectural, something you can actually build, refine, and improve with real intention.
The ultimate control comes not from trying to micromanage every little bit of effort,
No.
but from deliberately designing the robust structures within which that effort can flow effectively and produce results.
So, thinking about all this, what does it all mean for you right now, listening to this deep dive? Maybe take a moment to reflect. What environments are you currently living in? Both the physical ones and those powerful invisible ones, maybe without even fully realizing their daily influence on you.
What environments might you be passively inheriting? Maybe it's your team's default communication style, which might be chaotic. Maybe it's your company's entrenched meeting culture, which might be ineffective. Or maybe it's your own unconscious mental habits, patterns of thinking or reacting that are actually filled with chaos, distraction, or simply lack productive structure.
And critically, what environments are you actively engineering right now? Or perhaps more honestly, what environments are you failing to engineer that could fundamentally support your highest performance and your deepest clarity?
What's the very first, maybe even small environment you could consciously tackle? Maybe it's just the structure of your first hour in the morning. Maybe it's the specific layout and tools you allow on your physical desk. Or maybe it's the defined process you decide to use for handling all incoming information from now on.
What's that one thing you could deliberately design or redesign this week to create that powerful container the source describes? The one that makes focus the path of least resistance and actually compels your highest level of performance rather than just hoping for it? That feels like a really concrete place to start applying this profoundly different architectural perspective.
It shifts the focus, doesn't it? From feeling like you're fighting this overwhelming internal battle every day
Yeah.
to seeing it as a tangible, actionable design challenge you can actually tackle piece by piece.
Absolutely. This has been a truly fascinating deep dive into source material that really compels you, well, compels me anyway, to think differently about where performance, leadership, and sustained impact actually come from. It's not magic, it's not just talent, it's deliberate, intentional engineering of the environments we choose to inhabit.
And it provides a clear framework for building not just immediate output, but the underlying capacity to produce that output consistently, effectively, over the long haul.
A huge thank you for joining us on this deep dive today. We really hope these concepts about engineering your environment give you a powerful new lens, a new set of tools to view your own performance and unlock your potential.